very flexible so that we can get to know how we are governed and also ensure that we participate in the governance story. The Information Minister from this conference has charged the Right to Information Commission to step up public education on the RTI law. Officially opening the national headquarters of the Commission in Accra, the Minister noted that knowing the protocols for requesting and accessing information is important in holding leaders accountable and eliminating secrecy within the governance. We'll be bringing you videos from this event which just ended in the last 20 minutes. But the Minister for Information, Mr. COCOHOD Nkrumah, says government's topmost priority is to recover from the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic, and vaccinating the public is key to achieving such a recovery. He therefore called on the media to help realize that objective. The Minister for Information was addressing journalists at the Volta Regional Capital Hall, and this was part of his official nationwide duty tour.
The Information Minister was in the Volta region to visit the state-owned media institutions, as the media are considered key stakeholders in government's development agenda. The duty tour took him to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation's Volta Regional Office, where he inspected facilities and interacted with the staff. He intimated rebranding exercises that have started in most state-owned media houses would soon be felt in the region. The minister also visited the Ghana News Agency and the Information Services Department, ISD. The Volta Regional Minister, Dr. Archibald Lecha, commended the media in the region for their contribution to the region's development and urged them to continue to project the region in a manner that would attract investors. The Minister for Information, Mr. COCOHOD Nkrumah, said the media must meet government's efforts in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic by educating the public against myths about vaccines. He gave the assurance that plans to immunize about 20 million Ghanaians is on course. Local production of vaccines, he said, would also be realized. His emphasis was on Ghana recovering economically from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So government's number one objective is to recover the economy from COVID. How are we doing that? Three things. Number one, vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. Item B is to inject cash into the Ghanaian economy. Government is targeting 100 billion Ghana cedis stimulus into the Ghanaian economy. Item number three is that we need to continuously remind people to observe the preventive etiquette, because despite vaccines, you can still have breakthrough infection.
The Takoradi Harbour Circuit Court in the Western region has granted bail to Mrs. Josephine Mensah, the woman at the center of the alleged fake kidnapping and pregnancy case. She was admitted to a bail of 50,000 with 2 sureties, and our correspondent Mary Aziztunde has been following up on this issue and joins us with the very latest in that regard. Apologies for a technical hitch we are facing. But if you can hear me, what is the very latest from this issue?
Yes, Sonny, as you rightly mentioned, Josephine Mensah has been granted bail in the sum of 50,000 Ghana cedis with 2 sureties, and she's to reappear on October 14. And then let me add that during prosecution, Superintendent Emmanuel Bantele, who was the prosecutor, cleared the air on assertions that Josephine had been in police custody all the while when she was found in some bushes at Axim in the Nzema East municipality. But according to him, Josephine was not with the police. Actually, she was undergoing medical examination first at the Axim Hospital, where she was found, and then she was brought to the Efiem Kwanta Regional Hospital in Sekendi here for further medical examination. That is when she also met a team of psychologists, and that was when she confessed. So it wasn't as if she was denied access to lawyers, as is being alleged on some grounds. She was actually undergoing medical attention until she confessed, and then the police took over, hence the court appearance today. Sunny.
Did she plead guilty to the charges?
Yes, she did. No, she didn't plead guilty. She didn't. She didn't plead guilty.
And that's a bit surprising, because we're earlier told by the police that she has admitted to faking the pregnancy, and she's now not pleading guilty?
Yes, in court today, she said she wasn't guilty.
And what were some of the things that she told the court in her defense?
Yeah, she also mentioned that she got that the protruding belly is like a body part. She got it from the Takoradi market circle as 30 Ghana cedis. And well, she's been wearing it all along. She's been using that all along to fake their pregnancy.
What was the atmosphere like in court when she was granted bail?
Well, because I'm sure members of the public didn't get wind of the court appearance today, so a lot of people weren't at court as expected. It was just members of the media and then the security services. So after the ruling, she was granted bail. Just some members of her family were there. They took care of her. They took her away. Actually, she was hiding from the cameras. So the two women with her flanked her, and then she quickly ran into a vehicle. Although people around were of the view that some were of the view that she shouldn't have been granted bail in view of what she had done, but that is for the law to decide. Sunny.
When is she expected back in court?
And she's expected on the 14th of next month, that is October.
Okay, thank you so much. Keep your eye on the development. To be coming for more in our subsequent bulletins.
Definitely.
That's my colleague Maria Aziz Tunde, joining us from the Western region, where the woman at the center of controversy of a fake pregnancy appeared before the court today. She has been granted bail and expected to be back for the court proceedings to continue. Let's move to some other stories of the day. Education Minister Dr. Yawase Duchim is asking public tertiary institutions to allow students who obtain grade D7 in WASI to have access to tertiary education. According to the minister, the institutions must create access for such students through innovative programs. The minister says the education journey of students must not be curtailed simply because they had grade D7 in WASI. Currently, most public universities have set C6 as the least grade a student can get in the West African Secondary School Certificate examination to qualify for enrollments. Joining us to share some views on this development is Peter Antepate, the Executive Director for the Institute for Education Studies. Peter, glad you could join us this afternoon. What do you make of this assertion by the Minister for Education that students with D7 should be allowed into tertiary institutions?
Hello?
Yes, Peter, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is a progressive proposition that is coming from the Minister of Education. Some of us over the years have said that we will have to restructure our whole admission criteria, because sometimes you look at the overemphasis on the science, the pass in science, maths, and then English and some social studies. You think that we will have to have a second look at it, because the student who is into languages would definitely might not do well in the mathematics, core mathematics. So if that student gets a D7 in mathematics, but is having an A1 or a B2 in English and the other subjects that he sat for the WASI, why would you want to deny such a person admission into doing any kind of program in the tertiary institution simply because the person had a D7 in mathematics? So it is a progressive proposition coming from the minister. We think that it will not even end there. We think that we should be able to create an avenue for those who don't even pass at all, for them to enter the world of work and later find themselves back into the formal education system to do some short courses in order to upgrade themselves academically. This is how we'll be able to help solve the whole youth unemployment situation that we have in our country now. And we think that if we de-emphasize the focus on getting a grade A1, I'm not saying it is bad. No, it is good that a student passes and passes well, but we should also understand that in all form of high stakes tests, some students will not do well, and they will not do well not because they have not grasped the content. They might not do well because other circumstances didn't go to their advantage, and you do not want to curtail the life of such a student because he did not get a pass, what we call a pass in mathematics, English, or the sciences.
Kofi, don't you think we are sort of encouraging students or demotivating them from learning harder if we give chance for students with grade D7 to be allowed into the tertiary institutions? Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I heard Kofi, so I thought there's somebody...
Apologies for that. I was asking what would be the impact on competitiveness if we are to allow students with...
I got a question. I just heard Kofi, so I thought there was somebody there that you were talking to. No, we are not doing that. You see, the point is that coming from a situation where we have had series of challenges with people struggling to be able to pass their WASI, we need to understand that the stakes are high when it comes to WASI examination. And that is one of the reasons why for us, we think that people will go all length to be able to get questions so that they pass and pass well. Because you sit in an educational system in Ghana, you do 14 years of continuous education, 2 at the KG, kindergarten, you do 6 at the primary, you do 3 at the junior high school, you do 3 at the... Hello?
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you.
You do 3 at the senior high school level. You are doing 40 years of education, and simply because you do not pass what we call a pass in your WASI, you curtail your life. You have to sit down and write remedial to the time that you pass that particular paper. But in all sincerity, if a student gets a D7, that is a pass in YX scheme of work, and anybody who gets a D7 has passed that particular subject. It's different from getting an E8 or getting an F9. That means you have completely failed that particular subject. But if you get a D7 in YS scheme of work, you have passed. Now, what the universities are doing is that they accept up to D6. And some of us think that if a student is an art student and what is preventing him or her from entering or getting admission is something like a core mathematics, where the person had a D7. We think that the university should be able to admit such a student because the student is an art student. If a student is a science student, and what is preventing the student from obtaining admission is, let's say, the person had a D7 in English, we think that the university can't consider that student and admit the student because the student might have passed his maths, he might have passed all other courses. So that is the point that we are coming from. It's not that we are saying that anybody at all should be given admission. No, we are saying that you have to look at the peculiarity and the special circumstances of the student applying for admission and see whether the area that you deem that the student has failed, the student really can still progress his academic work without putting much emphasis on that.
Peter, very finally, if we study the trends, if we are to allow students with D7, it's going to increase the enrollment ratio by about 25%. Do we have the capacity to absorb such a number?
No, we don't have. And that is why when the minister started talking about increasing our tertiary enrollment ratio, you see when he was sworn in, that this has become some of the things that he's been talking about. Some of us have said that it's a good thing that he's pushing, but he needs to also address the infrastructure challenges in our tertiary institutions. And coming back with this particular proposition, we think that he should also commit to expanding the infrastructure available in our various tertiary institutions. And of course, we should not always look out for Hello? Hello?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
All right. We should not always look at residential kind of education. I think that this is the time that we should also look at distance education and then online education, so that students will not necessarily have to move from wherever they are across the length and breadth in the country to a particular campus to access tertiary education. As we try to expand access to tertiary education by looking at this particular challenge with our admission process, we need to also push for more students to apply through the distance education platform, so that they can also access tertiary education irrespective of wherever they are in Ghana. We should also be looking at pushing for satellite campuses, so that university like University of Ghana, for example, can have a satellite campus in all the 16 regions in Ghana. A student in the Bono region needs not to move to Accra before he accesses legal education in Legon. He can be in the Bono region and go to the satellite campus there and access tertiary education there. So these are propositions that the minister will have to also push alongside what he's doing, so that we'll be able to create the broader access that we need to create in order to admit all these numbers of students that we want to enter the tertiary institutions.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. Peter Antipate is the Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies, and has been helping us to appreciate the many arguments surrounding the call by the minister or directive by the Minister for Education to allow students with D7 in their WASI grades to enter the university, and this is going to increase the ratio of enrollment. And we're asking him what the ramification will be as far as our infrastructure and capacity to absorb is concerned. Now, for 3 days, regional directors of health, heads of agencies, senior health officials from the Ministry of Health, the Ghana Health Service and allied agencies received training on leadership for health transformation and good healthcare practices. It was put together by the World Health Organization to build capacity to deliver better health outcomes through management and interpersonal skills. The WHO believes Ghana's national roadmap for universal health coverage must be advanced through leadership and transformation.
Health coverage agenda is one of the health sector reforms to make health care accessible to all with improved outcomes. Achieving those requires attention to health sector governance and leadership across the different components of Ghana's health system. An example is the current COVID-19 pandemic that continues to strain health systems and threaten gains made in delivering primary health care. For the experts, high-level leadership competencies are pivotal in ensuring effective preparedness, response and recovery actions. It is therefore the policy of the World Health Organization, WHO, to support its African regional countries to ensure that health leaders are up to speed with the changing trends in health to deliver better health outcomes. The senior health officials at the 3-day training shared strategies, challenges and resources to deepen their management and leadership skills. The WHO country representative, Dr. Francisca Sono, said the training program will address Ghana's health sector transformation challenges. Senior health officials from the Ministry of Health are the first cohort receiving training from WHO in line with the universal health coverage agenda. In the next 4 months, other senior officials will be trained to provide better resources in health.
To be able to provide health for all, universal health coverage by 2030, we need to do things differently. We need to have the drive to motivate and innovate changes, bring innovations, bring additional systems that will allow us to leapfrog so that we are able to drive the change that is needed to transform the health of this country.
The training covered innovation, health interventions, mentorship to drive the universal health coverage in Ghana, as well as more effective use of service delivery data to inform decision-making.
Now, cocoa farmers in parts of the Western North region are calling on the Cocoa Marketing Board to help address challenges that are drawing back some of government interventions meant to boost cocoa yield. The farmers think the interventions such as Cocoa Farms Rehabilitation Program, free mass spraying and supply of subsidized fertilizers may fail if Cocoa Board doesn't intervene promptly. The issue came up when members of the Ghana Agriculture and Rural Development Journalists Association toured some cocoa growing communities and farms within the Bibiani and Huaso municipality in Western North to look at how cocoa farmers are preparing for the 2021-2022 season, which begins next month.
Introduced a number of interventions meant to increase the annual national cocoa yield. Interventions include free mass spraying of cocoa farms and fertilizer subsidy. In 2019, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire jointly launched the Cocoa Rehabilitation Program at Pillar 34, a cocoa growing border community in the Western North region, to cut down all diseased and moribund cocoa farms in the country. The program, being financed by the African Development Bank, is meant to replace the diseased and unproductive cocoa trees with disease-resistant, early maturing and high-yielding varieties at no cost to the farmers. During the rehabilitation period, the farmers were to be allowed to plant annual crops and economic plants, as well as receive 1,000 Ghana cedis for each hectare of cocoa farm destroyed as an incentive. The Western North region, famous for cocoa production, was the first area to benefit from this national intervention. Members of the Ghana Agriculture and Rural Development Journalists Association, GARDJA, set out to find out if the interventions were making any progress and bring the outcome of the visit to the attention of the authorities. The journalists spent 2 days touring about 8 cocoa growing communities and farms and interacting with farmers. The communities visited include Ahria, Surano, Daboase, Ntrenso, and Ajaka Manso.
Mucha mafuo bese nfieneni efuo no kokoo no enya nsisi so papa bia enti ene abanso betimi aboaye ne bia anka wonfa ma ye na akuyafo no na anka ya ankasa yenye ya ade.
The chief of Ntrenso, Nana Kwesi Asante, spoke about the frustrations that beneficiary farmers and the youth in the cocoa rehabilitation program are going through.
Just 6 months.
The secretary of the SEFWI Cocoa Farmers Cooperative, Mr. Nicholas Kwabna Badago, said the farmers are losing interest in the rehabilitation program due to some negative behaviors of their Greek extension agents. They want Cocoa Board's intervention. According to the chairman of the Ishia Yencha Dinti Farmers Union, Mr. Solomon Granson, the Cocoa Board recommended chemicals to spray their farms are not available.
Now, Ghana's current population is 30.8 million. On GBC News Current Affairs program, Talking Point, the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobna Enim, gave further details about the 2021 census figures and their implications for the country's economy.
These are the results from 3 broad perspectives: the population, the structures, and household perspectives. And for each of these perspectives, we've broken it down into different dimensions. So in terms of how they compare with previous censuses, the headline story is that since independence, when we did our first census in 1960, our population has grown 5-fold. Essentially, our population in 1960 was 6.7, and now we're talking about a population of 30.8. So approximately the population of Ghana since independence has gone up by 5-fold. There are quite a number of things that you've mentioned. One has to do with the population in Greater Accra that has gone up relative to Ashanti region, and also what is happening in the northern region. So to start with, from the 2021 population housing census, it's clear that Greater Accra region has caught up with the population in Ashanti region, with both regions standing at 5.4 million persons from the 2021 population and housing census. And what is happening in northern region is the 49.6% growth rate between the 2010 population housing census and the 2021 population and housing census. And indeed, that's the highest percentage growth rate across the 16 administrative regions, where Eastern region has the lowest of 10.8. This has implications for three key variables, i.e. fertility, mortality, and migration. As it stands, we are unable to clearly say that what is happening in terms of Greater Accra, what is happening in terms of Northern region is principally due to fertility, mortality, or migration. Again, once we put out the general report in November, we'll have a sense of how migration has played out, how fertility has played out, and again, how mortality has played out in these two regions. But what is coming up is the population density that we have in Greater Accra. Greater Accra has a population density of about 1,678.3 persons per every square kilometer, when on the national basis we are talking about 129 persons per square kilometer. So you see the variation between Greater Accra and the national picture, and more importantly the least region, which has 18 persons per every square kilometer. So in Greater Accra, relatively, if you think about the population density, we see a lot of pressure in Greater Accra relative to the other 15 regions, and for that matter the national picture, which stands about 129.1.
It's still not News Hour, live on GBC News and also on GTV, also live on Facebook at the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation page. Now, let's go back to our earlier story where the Information Minister, Mr. Opon Nkrumah, charged the Rights to Information Commission to step up public education on the RTI law, officially opening the national headquarters of the Commission in Accra. The minister noted that knowing the protocols for requesting and accessing information is important in holding leaders accountable and also participating in the governance process.
The opening of this head office is a significant milestone in the implementation roadmap. It further demonstrates the government's commitment to transparent and accountable governance and the fight against corruption. I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Governing Council of the RTI Commission for the work that you have done so far, even up to this point. I'm confident that the Commission will work tirelessly to safeguard the integrity of the Right to Information Act. While commending you for the bold work done so far, may I take advantage of the ceremony to admonish you on three major things. One, to step up the public education requirements as imposed on you by law, so that more and more people can know of the functioning of the RTI Act and how to access it. Two, continue to work with us to quickly complete the legislative instrument that needs to be laid before Parliament, so that the necessary impetus can be given to the Act to function fully. And three, do not hesitate to call out and even sanction public institutions that fall foul of the RTI Act.
Meanwhile, the media has been challenged to own the Right to Information Act by studying the Act properly, using it to their advantage and push the information to the general public. A proper understanding and interpretation of the Act is expected to empower the fourth estate of the country.
The first role of the journalist is to read the Act, to know the Act, to understand the Act. Because that is how you will know that if you have an emergency situation or a request that borders on life or liberty, etc., it's not 14 days, it's 48 hours. The second role of the media is to use the Act. I moderate a lot of press briefings, and I occasionally tell our colleagues that the world, especially during COVID, the world, in fact, the feedback from South Africa and Nigeria is that a lot of people were watching our COVID response from these countries. And not just watching the government response, but also watching the questions from journalists. And I draw our colleagues' attention to the fact that these questions of, I have heard that, somebody has told me that, I suppose that, I suspect that, can move a notch higher if we utilize RTI in getting the information.
It's important that the media understands, those who will be disseminating the information, they understand the Act, they own it, to use it to their advantage and also to educate the general public. on how to access information. And so it's the mandate of the Commission to do that through media, general platforms, and then also would rely on the media to push the information to the general public. So in any form or shape that we think it's appropriate, training programs for information officers in various establishments, we'll do that. We'll educate to make sure that people understand, because without education, we'll just be, we'll just have an act which will be closed, that will be on the shelves, and
Now, Ghanaians who studied in Germany and have returned have come together under an umbrella of Returned Expert Alumni Network Ghana, RAND. The initiative being facilitated by GIZ through its program Migration and Diaspora, PMD, has the overarching aim of ensuring that Ghanaians who have lived, worked or studied in Germany use their expertise acquired to contribute to the country's development.
Developing countries suffered from brain drain following the migration of its well-trained and skilled human resource to overseas in the 1980s and 90s for greener pastures. This was initially seen as a big setback to Ghana's socio-economic development. Today, studies have shown that the migration was a blessing in disguise since it turned out as brain gain. This is because professionals from developing countries who practiced in developed countries become a pool of expertise for the betterment and advancement of their respective home countries. Again, it is on record that these migrants contributed an amount of $3.5 billion in remittances in 2018 per a World Bank report in 2019. The return of the migrants was initiated by the German government through the program Migration and Diaspora, PMD, and implemented by the GIZ to enable the return to bring their expertise acquired to bear on the country's development. The Return Alumni Network Ghana, RANG, therefore has the ultimate goal of ensuring the reintegration of the returned alumni into the society for development under their mantra, one person can make a difference. The Senior National Coordinator of the PMD, Mrs. Abena Osua Amponsambiu, said through the GIZ PMD, the returned experts are given some incentives to facilitate their transition.
We give them salary support for a period of 2 years. So when you decide to come, we do advisory and support you to come home, and we top up your salary. We give you workplace equipment support to help your work delivery at your workplace and knowledge sharing. And we also support you for small capacity building measures.
The head of local government service, Dr. Nana Atu Arthur, said conscious and deliberate measures have been adopted to remove bottlenecks which impede the reintegration of such personnel into the system.
We should be able to learn from the Japanese, the Chinese, the Singaporeans who want to study in the US and Europe. And then when they went back, they knew the conditions at home were not the same as where they were living, but they left. And they have been able to build their countries to the level where they are now. So there will be challenges. Serving your own people, notwithstanding whatever that you do in Germany, UK, the US, home is home.
Some of the members called for the adoption of the German works, ethics and culture, such as honesty, hard work, politeness and respect for rules and regulations.
Now, he turned himself into a rock to divert the attention of slave raiders from capturing his subjects over 400 years ago. He, however, could not return to life after the slave raiders had left. For this singular act, his people continue to revere his spirit in high esteem. But the question is, what prevented Boneri, a traditional leader, from reappearing? How can the people of the Busa traditional area in the Wa municipality of the Upper West region immortalize this legend? GBC News correspondent Swala Abdul-Wahab seeks answers to the centuries-old questions.
This stone from afar looks like an ordinary one, but when you look at it closely, it resembles a human being. And we are told, is a remnant of one traditional ruler of Busa, Bunere, who turned himself into a stone in the 16th century in order to save the lives of his subjects.
During the infamous slave trade, where very strong kingdoms will make wars against weaker states, conquer them, and then sell them into slavery. It was during that time that some slave raiders came to the community, and this Bunere and his people were running away. At a point, they realized that the enemy was closing up on them. So Bunere, being the leader, had to devise a plan to sacrifice himself for the entire community to survive. And he was a very spiritual person, very powerful. He believed he could manifest into a tree, a rock, and other animals. So he asked his people to move to a different direction, whilst he diverted the attention of the slave raiders. So he diverted their attention, and they were closing up on him. At a point, being so spiritual and very powerful, he decided to turn into a rock, so to disguise himself from the slave raiders.
After turning into this stone to save the lives of his subjects, it became difficult for Bunere to come back to life.
So what they did was that they used an axe to cut portions of the rock. We call it the bleeding rock because after they made those wounds or cuts on the rock, because it was a human being that originally manifested into the rock, he started bleeding.
This bleeding rock serves several purposes to the people of the traditional area. Mr. Pelpo believes that it is time the Ghana Tourism Authority takes up this and develop it for the larger benefits of the society.
With the assistance of the key stakeholders, and for that matter, the community, we would be willing to ensure that we partner with all those who matter to project the area as one of important areas when visitors come to the region.
From Pagalahi to the Benner is very, very bad, and from Busa to Pagala itself, you see these areas, the bad road network is very affecting us.
Some people who are in need of economic assistance come to place money under the rock and pray for spiritual prosperity and guidance. For GBC News, Swala Abdul Wahab, Pagalahi.
Now, the report is part of GBC News' observation of the World Tourism Day, which falls on the 27th of September since the 1980. We go for a break. We return with Business, and Esther will be telling you what the Bank of Ghana is doing as far as the monetary policy rate is concerned. Don't go away.
And there's on GTV breakfast. So what's your pleasure?
You want it served buffet style, complimentary breakfast,
on-site restaurant,
or room service?
We've got you covered.
From Monday to Friday at 6 a.m.
with a trusted team.
So never skip breakfast.
On GTV breakfast.
How well do the adolescents understand reproductive health? How is peer pressure affecting the youth negatively? Do you know many boys and girls enter adolescence undernourished, making them more vulnerable to disease and early death? How safe are the youth understanding the natural changes happening in their bodies? It's time to enable positive dialogue. Join us on YOLO Talk and let's get interactive as we discuss smart decision making on each selected episode of your favorite youthful TV series, YOLO, with professionals and some of the actors live on GTV. YOLO Talk, making smart choices. YOLO, hey, you only live once. YOLO Talk is a GBC UNICEF partnership.
2006.